Our political strategist Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker for the final time this year, funnily enough. There you go. Let's make it a good one. Let's start on the Productivity Commission. Grahame, you first. Penalty rates on Sundays. It's not a new suggestion that they should be brought into line with Saturdays, but clearly from Michaelia Cash, the Employment Minister, the government ain't going to touch this one. They're going to leave it entirely to the Fair Work Commission. What do you think?
For a while. You know, look, I thought the two commissioners, Peter Harris and Patricia Scott, I thought they did a good job. Not just penalty rates, it's minimum wages, it's even bullying in the workplace.
Yep.
So I'm only halfway through reading it, but it's like this. Look, I suspect what will happen with the government is that they will have a talk to a hell of a lot of people between now and the election. But it's not real to think that the industrial relations policy the government has at the next election is silent. And I suspect
they need to do something.
Well, I suspect there'll be quite a few people to say, look, you've got to say something about penalty rates, particularly Sunday, just Sunday maybe, or weekend penalty rates, and something about unfair dismissals. I don't think anyone would say go further than that, but I suspect there'll be quite an intense debate within the coalition as to what they should say.
Within the government itself?
Within the government.
Right.
And
there is a fear about the work choices.
And I'd be a little bit surprised if the industrial relations policy is silent on those two things, because then what else would be in the policy?
Well, the minister's just said they're not going to go there.
The minister has said she will talk to a lot of people and it's up to the Fair Work Commission, which is true. But ultimately, the ministers, the Prime Minister and the backbenchers, everyone's got to say, what are you going to do after the next election? And I think that is where the debate will be. What does the policy say at the next election? In other words, could they get a mandate for a change?
Bruce, Labor's position on this, well, it's far more straightforward. No change at all on penalty rates. They're not going to support any movement on Sundays, Saturdays, anything. Do you think that is defensible?
I do, and I think that the government should also be in a position where they actually say, we're going to make a decision on this, not fob it off to the Fair Work Commission. After all, they commissioned the work, and it's up to them now as a matter of policy to say what they're going to do. I think people are very anxious about any increase or any decrease in their pay packet, and most Australians are pretty sympathetic to that position as well. There might be other ways of dealing with it, like increasing the hourly rate slightly right across the week so it compensates in that way. But you can't just go and cut people's weekend pay and think that they're going to accept it. They're not.
But is there an issue here, Bruce? Labor, we know, wants to try and chase that small business vote. It wants to try and win back some of that growing number of small business owners and operators. This is an issue that resonates with a lot of them.
It is, and I think there are other ways that you can look after the interests of small business. You can, look at their tax position, for example, without actually hurting the people that work for them. And that's an important thing. And as I said, there are other ways of skinning the cat. You could actually increase the hourly rate across the week and make it a little easier for people that way, because a lot of these distinctions are artificial to some extent. But if you're reliant on that Sunday rate, then they're not artificial, they're very real.
Look, let's move on, because I want to get through a few other things. This controversy, Grahame, about Duncan Lewis, the head of ASIO, calling a couple of Liberal MPs, Andrew Hastie and Dan Tehan. What's your view of this? Storm in a teacup or inappropriate for Duncan Lewis and maybe even the Prime Minister in all of this?
I was certainly surprised when I first saw it, because the orthodox would be for the head of ASIO to say, look, I got a problem here, and then go and have a talk to his boss, the Attorney General, right. And then the Attorney General talks to the rest of the politicians. Now, he's gone direct. And then I thought, well, hang on. His job is to make sure that Australia is safe and Australians are safe. And if he feels talking direct to a couple of politicians, then why shouldn't he? But my first reaction was, oh,
but yeah, I mean,
different.
I agree with that. That if he feels that that's necessary, sure, in defence of Australia. But I can't. I mean, I'm not an MP. I don't know how often this has happened in the past. I certainly haven't heard of it before.
It's pretty unusual. It's pretty rare. Then again, blowing people up is pretty rare
well,
too.
It's a very difficult challenge we face. Bruce, what have you made of this one?
I thought it was wrong of the Prime Minister, and I thought it was wrong of him to accept the the implied request from the Prime Minister. When the Prime Minister sends a text message with the phone number of a politician, then there's only one conclusion that the head of ASIO, who presumably is pretty good at working out these sorts of things, is going to draw, and that is there's an expectation that he's going to make that call. And I think he's crossed the line.
But I mean,
at
the
that
suggestion's been that Duncan Lewis was asking Malcolm Turnbull for the phone number. Why the head of ASIO wouldn't have the phone number of every, well, probably every Australian that he needs to find the number for, I don't know. But,
exactly.
He's got yours. He's listening to you.
It's rather comforting, really, isn't it? I hope the Prime Minister hasn't got my number. Look, I think it's all wrong. I do. I think it was wrong on both sides, and I think they both crossed the line. And you have to be very careful when you're dealing with security issues like this. I mean, it is when you're dealing with national security, that's fine. If you're trying to send a message to a particular MP, that's wrong.
And MPs should be free to say whatever they think on these issues, as long as they are, I suppose, well informed. Let's move on, because I do want to get in the time we've got left. Some of your thoughts on this year and the year to come. Bruce, you first on this. Some winners and losers this year. There's some obvious ones. Malcolm Turnbull becoming Prime Minister makes him a winner, I suppose. But who have you seen as some of the key winners and losers in 2015?
Well, I thought the decision today around trade was a really interesting one, and yet another example of a minister who's doing extremely well. I think obviously Tony Abbott did very poorly. Joe Hockey did very poorly. They are, well, I don't think Hockey's been a loser. I think Hockey's been a big winner.
He's going to end up in Washington.
Probably for all the wrong reasons. But I do think on the Labor side that Anthony Albanese has continued to take the fight right up to the government at every turn. I think he's done a good job in that regard. I mean, Bill Shorten's had to fight the Royal Commission as well as the government this year, so it's been tough for him. But I think he started to make some inroads in recent days. But it's been a tough year for the opposition because they've been used to dealing with Abbott. Now they're dealing with a much harder politician in Turnbull.
Grahame, how have you scored some various players this year?
A couple of things. Story of the year, Michelle Payne and Prince of Penzance in the Melbourne Cup.
Yep.
Event of the year, the Rugby League tied grand final.
Oh, yes.
Winners on politics, Malcolm Turnbull obviously, Scott Morrison, Arthur Sinodinos is back. A couple though, Martin Parkinson, who goes from head of Treasury to out the back door to, hey, back as the head of the public service completely. But I thought the big winners are the 20 coalition backbenchers under 4%. Most of them look like being onces, and they now might be back again thanks to the losers. Well, I don't know about loser, but certainly Tony Abbott would be disappointed with how the year finished. And Bill Shorten has gone from, hey, I might be Prime Minister, to, oh, will I actually still have my job come the election?
Just a quick one. Well, I was going to get the predictions for 2016, and we'll spend a bit more time on this in the new year, but the election question, when? When should Malcolm Turnbull?
I'm an October, November person. There's no reason to go early. When you get tricky in politics, it backfires.
Bruce, what would you suggest?
If I was the government, I'd be going earlier rather than later, because I don't think it's going to get any easier for Turnbull. And I think if they introduce a GST, or say they're going to introduce a GST, it's going to be a very interesting 2016.
Thank you both for all your contributions this year. Really always enjoy our chats on a Monday afternoon. Have a great Christmas, and we'll see you in 2016 and get into some more predictions of the tax debate, what the opposition's going to do. Thank you, Grahame. Thank you, Bruce.
Happy Christmas.
All right, we will take a quick break. Back with more right after this.